We will get started. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cando's Links to Learning this Tuesday afternoon. Hope that you are warm, you are well wherever you are. My name is Michelle. I'm joining in from Amiskochiwaskagan, so Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory. As I was mentioning early, we got a chilly day. It definitely feels like a winter today. And our guest speaker, Nicholas, is joining us from Ontario, and they got a whole bunch of white stuff, snow. I remember when I was young, we could make forts back in the day. So it sounds like they got fort making snow out there. So wherever you are, we just hope that you are well. Thank you for joining us. We feel so honored that you're here. I'm looking forward to today's presentation. I'm not gonna lie, this is something brand new to me, and it's all about aquaculture. So we're gonna learn a little bit about that today. But before we get started, let's just take a moment and give a shout out to Creator for the gift of another day. Last night was the full moon, and for us, or for me as a Cree woman, I always take some time and give thanks to Creator, do ceremony, especially on that full moon. So we give thanks to Creator for all the gifts that have been given to us, the gift of this day, of this moment, the gift of the ones who've walked before us, the elders and the knowledge keepers who bring those teachings to us that help us to walk in a good way. We're thankful for this beautiful land that we live on and help us to be people who would take care of the land and all the animals, the plants, and the sacred waters. And we are thankful for all our families and our friends and all our relations. So hi, Creator, we give thanks. All right, so today's guest speaker, Nicholas Huber. Ooh, I don't know if I said that right, but he is joining us from Ontario. So we're glad you're here. I know life is probably very busy for you, so you've taken some time out of your schedule to be here with us, and so we feel so honored. So he's going to speak on the aquaculture. So a couple of fun facts that I pulled from his bio, that he served as a senior manager in Scotland as the Seawater Regional Manager overseeing operations and production. That's really great. That's really cool. So since his return back to Ontario, he's worked as a consultant working within the Ontario aquaculture industry and a brief period within the renewable energy sector. So he joined Waubetek in August 2017. I trust that you're going to tell us a little bit about that as well. So we are looking forward to hearing what you have to share on aquaculture. Like I said, this industry is something that's really new to me. So I really look forward to learning more about this and being informed and enlightened. So we're really honored to have you join us today, Nicholas. So I'm going to just pass this off to you. If there's any questions, comments throughout his presentation, use that chat box and I will definitely make note of them. And at the end, there will be opportunity for any questions or comments, any dialogue about today's presentation. So we'd love to hear from you. Also, there is going to be an evaluation link for those who've joined this webinar. And when you fill that in, I believe your name will be entered to win a draw. And I think there's a $100 Visa gift card that could possibly have your name on it. So we'd love to hear your feedback from today's presentation. All right, so you've joined Cando's Links to Learning. We're glad you're here. I'm going to pass it off to our guest speaker, Nicholas. The mic is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to try to do this share screen thingy and bring up my presentation. So just bear with me, please. We'll see if that works. Did that work? Okay, right on. So again, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate giving the opportunity to speak about aquaculture to everybody today. and the nice warm introduction there by Michelle. So yeah, I'm Nicholas Huber, and I work for Waubetek Business Development Corporation as a Senior Aquaculture Development Officer. So a quick 1-2 on me. After I guess my formal education in aquaculture, I moved out to British Columbia, spent 7 years working out on the farms, the Atlantic salmon farms out of Vancouver Island. And then from there, I was fortunate to take a promotion, and I was sent over to Scotland, where I lived up in the Orkney and the Shetland Isles as the essentially a seawater production manager, looking after 20 plus farms and a couple processing plants, essentially our harvesting, pretty well everything that happened at sea. I was fortunate to gain that experience, so that was great. Following that, my intention was to travel back to BC to carry on with things, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to pop home and see family and friends and take a short little break. And about a month and a half into that, I met my future wife, and I've been landlocked in Ontario ever since. So couple kids and a farm and some chickens and everything. I'm still here in Ontario and really happy to be here. I started a small one-man show consulting company where I was supporting the Ontario aquaculture industry, predominantly supporting them through some environmental monitoring and sampling, which brought me to Waubetek and had a great opportunity to join the team with Waubetek, and I've been there since 2017 in August. So absolutely love my job. I'm very fortunate to have it and work with so many communities within our region. So a little bit on Waubetek. So we're located in Whitefish River First Nation in Ontario, and that's right on the mouth of the journey onto Manitoulin Island. I work remotely, and I'm located down in Southern Ontario. It's an Aboriginal owned and controlled organization that delivers business financing and economic development services to First Nations and Aboriginal businesses located throughout northeastern Ontario. Member of the network of Community Futures in Ontario, and an Aboriginal financial institution in Canada. The goal is to assist and strengthen the economies of local First Nations, as well as the whole region of Ontario through business and community development. So Waubetek delivers quite a few different services, commercial loans as a Community Futures Development Corporation and as an Aboriginal financial institution, an AFI, business counseling and support to individuals and communities in the area of starting or expanding a business, community development, proposal development, joint ventures, and access to financing. We're also involved in some sector strategies, so fisheries and mining, tourism, and of course aquaculture. So I just work in essentially the fish world, focusing on freshwater aquaculture. And that's what we're going to talk today. There is a difference between aquaculture, let's call it seawater aquaculture, and freshwater, and we're quite involved in the freshwater aquaculture side. For those who are not aware of aquaculture, I threw a definition in here just to help understand what it is. So there's lots of different definitions of aquaculture. To me, this one aligns quite well. So it's the cultivation of aquatic animals and plants, especially fish, shellfish, and seaweed, in a natural or controlled marine or freshwater environment. And I'd like to think the best way to kind of wrap your head around all of that is just think of it as underwater agriculture. So aquaculture occurs all across Canada from coast to coast to coast. The largest aquaculture sectors in Canada are Atlantic salmon, the culture of mussels, trout, oysters, and clams. And there's a lot of other species that are farmed as well. There's the nori, so seaweed culture, the barramundi. There's culture of walleye and perch and bass, and they all have their different reasoning as to why they're being cultured. Canada's aquaculture industry is a very important employer and economic driver in many coastal and rural and Aboriginal communities. And aquaculture can very much be a means to address food security locally and globally. And maybe just a quick word on that is, unfortunately, through this experience with the pandemic, aquaculture has really, well, food security has always been a concern and of note. But the pandemic, through my experiences, aquaculture really seemed to gain the attention of a lot of First Nation communities as to handle food security concerns while dealing through the pandemic. So, for instance, aquaponics, and I'll talk about aquaponics shortly here, is definitely been an area of interest that has grown to be quite popular through the pandemic here. So yeah, Indigenous communities are poised for growth. The industry in central Canada is ready for expansion. It's already happening, and we'll talk about that shortly here. Indigenous communities are in a unique position to benefit from sustainable aquaculture development due to their aquatic resources, rights, and special access to aquaculture development sites. And we're seeing this happening. Yeah, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So for further information about aquaculture, I thought it would just be a quick highlight of the different areas of focus of aquaculture. So there's open net pen aquaculture, and you can probably best relate that to the main aquaculture out on the two coasts, the east and the west coast, in some of the salmon farms. There's land-based aquaculture, so recirculating aquaculture systems, or RAS. There's flow-through systems and pond culture. You can have enhancement and rehabilitation hatcheries for stocking purposes. There's put and take fisheries and pay to fish. So that's an example where you would stock a lake or a pond, and then people would come and pay to fish that private pond. There's aquaponics, and we'll talk about that shortly, but that's essentially the combination of a land-based recirculating aquaculture system mixed with the ability to grow vegetables. And then there's micro hatcheries, and we'll talk about that, and that's essentially just a real small facility. And you can do this for the commercial market, the commodity and live markets. People, you know, research and development is a big driver behind some aquaculture. There's various types of markets. So there's niche markets as well. So there's organics, and a lot of people have success with farmers markets as well. You can even grow or become a part of a certain segment of the industry by supplying fingerlings to the net pen sector or for private ponds. And it can address food security and definitely help out with enhancement of particular species that you may want to target. So, excuse me, where does our fish and seafood come from? Well, historically, it comes from our lakes and our oceans. When people needed more, they just fished harder, longer, deeper, or further away. But there's obviously a problem with that. There's a lot of fishermen that have become way too efficient. Bigger boats, bigger equipment. So why aquaculture? To go along with that is the demand for seafood now exceeds the fisheries capacity, which is definitely concerning. Represents a sustainable and healthy source of food. It provides a means to rehabilitate wild populations. So that would be populations that are the numbers aren't what they used to be. And this stat should probably actually be refreshed, but 10 years from now, aquaculture will need to increase by 50% to supply the growing demand for seafood. So I just wanted to throw these two little graphs in here. So on the left here, the seafood production, the blue squiggle line represents the wild fish capture. And you can see it has increased around in the, let's call it in the early 70s. You can see how people were starting to fish more intensely, bigger equipment, bigger nets, and traveling a lot further as technology advanced, and unfortunately it has remained relatively stable for many years now, and we probably won't see an increase beyond, and in fact a decline. On the aquaculture front, which is the graph below in red, it continues to fill that gap and to take a lot of the stress off of the wild fish capture, and definitely is filling that void here. This graph is an older one, unfortunately, and I apologize for reflecting it, but and we'll talk about it in the next slide, but the production of aquaculture is in excess of what's reflected there. And I wanted just to show some of the key species that are being cultured here in Canada. So you'll see predominantly up in the top left corner there, we've got Atlantic salmon. Takes roughly about over 70% of what's being produced here in Canada, and that is being done on the two coasts, the east and the west coast. Oyster culture, excuse me, as well as mussel culture, both are done again on the coast. And then we've got rainbow trout. Ontario is the largest freshwater producing province of aquaculture species, and then followed by Quebec and Saskatchewan, and that's mainly trout, rainbow trout. But there's also other species that are being cultured, and we'll talk about that shortly here. Just to wrap your hand around the world aquaculture production, so 82.1 million tons of aquatic animals are produced every year, 32.4 million tons of aquatic algae, and I cannot say that I know much about the ornamental shellfish and pearl side of things, but 26,000 tons of that. Combined, the industry is worth $263.6 billion American. So the Canadian aquaculture stats, so we produce 187,026 tons of aquatic species, again, predominantly Atlantic salmon. The aquaculture production value is 1.23 billion. And 5.2 billion in economic activity in Canada. And it employs over 21,000 full-time workers in Canada, generating 970 million in labor income. So we've got definitely a decent stake of being involved in aquaculture here in Canada, but there's no question a great opportunity to enhance that when we have sustainable options, for sure. So aquaculture is a huge topic, and today it's really tough to go beyond scratching the surface. So what I wanted to do is just reflect a high level look at some of the aquaculture options that folks have to consider. And if any of these are of interest, or if you do, or if you are interested in learning more about these, I'd be very happy to spend some time with you and chat further about this. But this is essentially just a snapshot of what's out there. So net pen aquaculture. So this is what I was talking about earlier. That's predominantly on one of the two coasts. We do have inland net pen aquaculture here in Ontario, as well as in Lake Diefenbaker in Saskatchewan. It's typically a lower unit cost of capital and operation than land-based aquaculture. Rule of thumb, should be located in a more remote area to avoid potential user conflict scenarios. So ideally, don't want to have these in kind of a cottage country, because some cottagers may not want to look at the farms out their windows. Site selection is vital, as many sites have high surface temperatures during the summer months. So cannot stress enough, siting is so important when it comes to net pen selection. There's a lot of variables that you have to consider, and it's very important to ensure that the site qualifies before you invest significantly. need to be sufficiently large to be economical. So rule of thumb is minimum 400 tons per year, but I have to stress that that is every area is different, and caution, we would need to look at that and what would work best in your area as well. So, but that's just a rule of thumb. And yeah, location. For freshwater aquaculture should not be located in a small confined hypolynean area, and suitable location to minimize weather and ice flow. So yeah, freshwater freezes obviously, and for this type of application, we've got to be able to get out of the way of ice flows. It's something that's relatively unique to this sort of aquaculture, and I'll show you shortly how we can do that. So here's two examples of what the cages can look like. You've got a traditional steel net cage that can be square or rectangle in nature. And then we've got the HDPE, so high density plastic net pens called a polar circle. They're obviously round, and the fish are living inside of these nets. So the net would be draped and tied off along the top, and the nets and the fish live within in that environment with the water coming and going. So with steel net pen, I always like to say that you can become more intimate with your stock with this type of steel net pen, because you're constantly working up and down on this system, and you're always looking at your fish. So this is an example of one of the farms that I used to work on. That was my house that we would live in with my crew, and we would spend shifts living out on the ocean for 8 days, and then we would get 6 days off as a farmer. And you know, if you forgot a screwdriver in your tool shed there, you're walking down, so you might as well constantly be looking at your fish. So that's kind of what I mean by being intimate, and you can pick up behaviors and signs, fish health. That's all being done through observation, and of course when you're feeding as well. They're very stable and easy to work from, and they are relatively safe to work from too, as long as you're using common sense. They can take weather, but definitely better in a low energy site. But not for offshore locations, and ice flows can be a problem, and we'll talk about that shortly. And as an example of the polar circles or the HDPE plastic net pens, so as you'll see in this picture, there is more space in between each of the net pens, which can encourage more flow through these independent cages. They are definitely more forgiving at high energy sites because of how they're moored. They can flow around, so they can take more energy than the site that I had reflected earlier. They are independently moored to a system grid, so if you ever need to move one of those cages, you essentially can detach and go. They are strong and durable. Sorry, and they you don't spend as much time with the fish or on the cage. So if you recall the last picture, as I was saying, if you forgot a screwdriver, you're always on that cage and you can walk. Whereas with this sort of setup, you've got to travel from to each cage by boat kind of thing. So you are kind of limited as to how much time that you can spend while you're doing your job. However, technology like with everything, has improved and gives you the availability to spend more time with the fish, even though that you may not be on that cage. So we have the ability, we have cameras in these cages, so you can observe and watch the fish feed. We've got below surface and above surface cameras, so you can definitely watch your fish that way. Yeah, as mentioned, we travel to each net by the boat, and they can be a little bit more of a challenge to work from depending on the age and the model. Today, the newer models of these polar circles, there's lots of room on the walkway on the outside, and they are much more safer than what they used to be. And talking about ice flow, so definitely here in Ontario, this is something that all the farmers have to worry about is ice. You can't beat the weather, so we got to figure out how to work around it. So What we typically do is when the ice breaks up, that is the risk because there's no stopping it. So what we have found, we need to get out of the way of that. So what we do is we sink these cages when the ice starts to break out. We get out of the way, let the ice float away, and then we can essentially pop back up. So we have the ability to sink these cages on purpose. So what you would do, one of the first things that you do is you sew in a fine mesh to the top of the cage. There's no point sinking a cage if you can't keep your fish inside of it. So a very important point that you want to do, or a very important step that you need to do at the front end. And then what you do when you believe that the ice flows are coming, you just sink down and due to the time of year, you don't have a lot of pressures through feeding. The fish's metabolism is already relatively low right now, and you just get the fish out of the way. And they can, the rainbow trout we found here in definitely in Ontario, they can handle approximately about week and a half to 2 weeks that they can be submerged before needing to be brought back up to surface. So it's definitely a technique that the farmers here have had a lot of success with. You can also put booms. They work, but they don't work as great as this. And there's lots of different cage options that one can consider. Definitely want to highlight one of the great farms that we have in Ontario here. It's Buzzwah Fisheries, and they're located in Wikwemgong unceded territory in Ontario. Picture of Ben Kanoswe on the right. He's a member of the community, and he owns and operates this facility, and he's been running it for over 20 years now. Has a reputation of being one of the most successful farmers here in Ontario, does a great job. And it started just with a couple cages initially many years ago, and has grown his company to be a very successful. And then we've got land-based aquaculture. So this is just a picture of one of the many farms that we have here. The great thing about land-based aquaculture is you can essentially dictate to the system what your fish needs. So as an example, if the fish that you're culturing prefers 14 degrees, instead of relying on what Mother Nature hands you, for example, in the open net pen aquaculture, you can capitalize on some synergies by ensuring that you're delivering that 14 degrees in the system. They have a water pollution or a water treatment facility attached to these, and they constantly recycle the same water. So beyond your initial fill, these facilities have the ability to recycle 98 up to 99% of that water constantly. So really good option to consider. And some of these farms can either be, you'll see the, we call it a raceway. That's a long rectangular tank where the fish would be cultured. So you can either have the raceway technology or a circular tanks. It depends on your preference and the facility. So RAS is another, I guess, name for recirculating aquaculture systems. They can be more sophisticated rearing strategy compared to net pen aquaculture. So a lot more moving parts. You've got pumps, you've got electrical draws. You got to make sure that you're controlling your dissolved oxygen and your temperature, because if things go bad in this facility, they can go bad pretty quickly. So you've got monitoring to make sure all your water levels are exactly what they need to be. And if they're not, an alarm will go off, and you have the ability to correct that. Definitely, you are very reliant on electricity, which can come from many different sources. But you know, with these facilities, the fish do need moving water. Because you are growing intensely, right? So you definitely need to be able to move that water a lot. It's suitable for produce high value species. The advantages is it's very advantageous within areas that have limited water supplies. So you can grow fish now where you traditionally may not have in the past. These systems are no doubt more expensive, both from the capital and the operating costs. Again, the pumping costs, the electrical costs, right, to move that water. And some of these can be technically complex. They can be deployed anywhere that there is a modest supply of water and access to power and other infrastructure. So again, if you have access to a lake, a river, stream, municipal water, or well, something could be possible. And it's just a matter of figuring out what your goals and objectives are and see if it's feasible, essentially. These facilities can be run grid tied or generator, so diesel generator, or a lot of facilities are coming online nowadays with combined heat and power that could run off of natural gas or propane and renewables as well. But the key when we're talking the electrical game is you need a backup. And I think that was the point that I was getting to before I kind of lost it earlier, is that you definitely need a backup, because if your let's say if the power goes out on your grid, you need to have a backup power because you do have a limited amount of time to address your fish appropriately. So, and a lot of facilities have a backup to the backup as well, because you just can't afford that. And as I mentioned earlier, you can dictate the ideal growing conditions based on the species that you're culturing. And then there's the eggs and the fingerling supply. So several commercial hatcheries throughout Canada produce eggs and fingerlings for sale to on-growers. Many of these facilities have their own brood stock. So brood stock is essentially the mummies and the daddies, where you're getting the eggs and your genetics from. Some operators import eggs from outside of Canada. There's folks here in Ontario that buy barramundi fry from New Zealand, and they get that shipped, I think, bi-weekly, if not monthly, from across the pond. Depending on the species, egg can be available 12 months of the year. So relying on culturing a domesticated species is very advantageous from that perspective, due to the egg availability. And culturing, eggs and fingerlings can be successfully shipped at great distances. So we've become very good at shipping eggs and fingerlings. It doesn't necessarily have to be just in your backyard. And given the opportunity, they can be transferred relatively stress-free. So speaking about aquaponics, it's a marriage of aquaculture and hydroponics. So aquaponics combines these two technologies in which plants are fed the aquatic animal waste, so the fish poop. The microbes produced have an important role as the beneficial bacteria converts the fish waste into elements that the plants can use. So, they can be a very impactful system depending on what you want to do. And it's essentially can be looked upon as kind of the two birds with one stone kind of scenario. Can grow plenty of vegetables with little fish, but there are numerous business models that can be investigated. So there are a lot of facilities that are not as much fish focused. So they only grow as many fish as their vegetables need, because that's a business model that they have. They do quite well on that. There's other facilities that grow more fish than what their, I guess, vegetables need, because that's the kind of scale in the market that they're focusing on. So every scenario is different, and you can have a lot of success with that. It's again just trying to figure out what your goals and objectives are. They are an excellent option for remote communities. So northern communities that experience food security concerns and have very high cost of getting some of the fresh food up there, and when they do get the fresh food, it has a very limited shelf life. This is where aquaponics can shine to be able to provide that fresh, nutritious food and have a larger shelf life on the vegetables. They can address food security, as mentioned, and dietary concerns as well, and try to change some eating habits. And they can be relatively easy to include school-age children for learning opportunities as well. Enhancement and rehabilitation. This is an example of a basic facility in one of the communities that I'm fortunate to work with. And so enhancement and rehabilitation focuses on supporting fish populations through the spawning and hatching process within a fish hatchery to restock the water body. They typically are relatively small, but they can make big impacts. Enhancement and rehabilitation should be paired with a responsible fishery management plan, as well as a strong stocking and production plan. So it's not as simple as just throwing more fish into the water. They need to be managed properly as well. Typically includes stocking fry and fingerlings. So that's a very early stage within the fish's growing stages. And they are excellent social opportunities attached to these facilities, as well as a great opportunity for youth activities. So, there's a lot of examples of communities that I work with that are involved in enhancement and rehabilitation, and they've grown their operations in such a way that there is a lot of community involvement. The youth are involved, a lot of activities with members going out and participating within these facilities. You can enhance those species that you have a strong traditional and economic tie with. And they can be relatively inexpensive to build and operate. And micro hatchery, so best described as a mini fish culture facility, most used for enhancement and rehabilitation and educational purposes. Excellent option for school-age children within an elementary school, and can form part of a curriculum. And it definitely creates a fun and informative way to learn. So these facilities are installed in a fair bit of First Nation communities here in Ontario. And I've been into some of the classrooms, definitely pre-COVID, and watching the kids interact with these facilities are a lot of fun. They're learning, and it is a fun way to learn. They're involved in counting, watching some of the kids put some of the eggs that they were picking from the hatch jar there and putting them under microscope, learning about biology. A lot of really good examples of how the children were interacting with these. So and I see more of these coming online every year. Once the fish hatch, the children can also be involved in the ceremonial stocking within the community. So they go down to the lake or the river and they get to release the fish that they essentially hatched. Can easily fit on your typical desk, and they are they are easy to operate. There's no doubt about that. And depending on the species that you focus, you can run this facility all year. With multiple species being hatched. So as an example, walleye, they're spring spawners. So you could have, or I'll start actually with trout. So you can do the trout in the fall. At the beginning of the school year up until Christmas, right? And then when the kids come back and aligned with the walleye spawning, you can then have a secondary hatch or batch rather go through that facility. So it's just not, you just don't have to use it for the one season, and they are inexpensive to purchase and to operate. So talked a little bit about aquaculture here, and thought I would spend some time as to if this is something of interest how to go about it, and to put on your radars, I guess, that there is some help out there. So within Waubetek, as I mentioned, I'm the Senior Aquaculture Development Officer, and one of my main tasks and duties is facilitating the NICVI program. NICVI stands for the Northern Integrated Commercial Fisheries Initiative. And that's the aquaculture development source. So it was created to provide direct support to Indigenous communities and groups to develop sustainable aquaculture operations. Eligible project activities may include expansion or upgrade of existing finfish, shellfish, and freshwater land-based or open net pen aquaculture facilities. So a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about today. The program can be there to help purchase equipment and gear and infrastructure for new and expanded aquaculture operations, acquisition of existing aquaculture operations, business plans, feasibility studies, and environmental assessments. Pretty well, the vast majority of, let's call it, the developmental activities, the program is there to help, and other aquaculture operation startup costs funded on a one-time basis. So for example, we can help out with on a one-time basis a salary for a year as the farm comes online. Two things the program was not set up to assist with is essentially bridge financing and scientific studies. It is the program is focused on community projects. So the community is a proponent. And you know, one of our other pillars is training and capacity. That's a huge area there, and ideally economic driven projects. So ideally to be an economic driver. So the NICVI territory is quite vast, and the program has been kind of siloed into two areas. So NICVI that covers fisheries and aquaculture is the Yukon Territory, the Northwest Territory, Nunavut, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Northern Quebec, so Nunavik. And then there's NICVI that only deals with aquaculture. So in my case, we're able to work within Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. So that I'm able to outreach beyond Waubetek's traditional region because we facilitate this program. So the NICVI Aquaculture Development Source, it was officially launched and established in April 2019. Expect to receive an additional 5-year commitment to the program in 2023-2024 fiscal year. So it's funded and administered by DFO, which is the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and facilitated and co-delivered by Waubetek for Central Canada. Again, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And access to the aquaculture development support and expertise through the Aquaculture Development Officer position. So myself. Currently, right now, I'm a team of one. I've been a team of one since 2017, but help is on its way. I'm hopefully gonna have a number 2 individual as a part of my team soon. So we've recently put a job ad out and there's been a lot of interest in it. So we're still working through that process, but excited about that anyways. So the typical NICVI process, just to map that out. So you would work with the ADO, the Aquaculture Development Officer, to develop application and supporting documentation. So we essentially discuss, we work together, we build that package, and once the community is happy with that application, we would submit it to the NICVI program. Then the ADO is available to present and defend the submitted project to the NICVI committee. So that would typically be, if there's any additional questions or if there needed a little bit of lobbying or push, just to get these projects approved. Because I was involved with working with the community, building this application package, I'm available to answer those questions and help that out. So if the project is approved, a letter of offer is provided directly from DFO, approximately 4 to 5 weeks from submission. And sometimes it's a little bit earlier than that. The letter of offer then would be submitted to the community, to the chief, the leadership, and that if they're happy with the content of the letter, that would then be ideally accepted. And if it's accepted, a contribution agreement would be created approximately 2 weeks after that acceptance of that letter of offer. So multi-year projects can be accepted. Communities can participate on a year program, so it's not a one and done. The whole idea is to be here from day one till you're operating, built and operating, and even beyond operation. There's additional support that can be gained through the program. For example, training and capacity. And operational upgrades, expansions, all those kind of things. So definitely it's not a one and done. Applications can be accepted all year round with a soft cutoff of November 30th. So it is kind of a revolving door, which I think is great, because I don't believe all good projects should be developed between April 1st and the beginning of a fiscal year. It is a fiscal year geared program though, and 90% of the funds can be made available ahead of time, with 10% that acts as a holdback until that project is completed and reported on. The program can support up to 90% of the project costs, with a 10% contribution from the community. And there's an unofficial cap of $150,000 per community per year, but more is definitely considered on a case-by-case basis. So I say it's an unofficial cap because that's exactly what it is. So if there's a community that has a really good project and fits a lot of the morals of the program, however, it's above 150. So as an example, only $210,000, let's submit it and see what happens, and we might be able to get it above that. So it, again, only unofficial. And the community must be the main proponent for this. How am I doing for time? So the NICVI Aquaculture Development Source. So some examples that we've been able to help out with to date: equipment and infrastructure, expansion of existing operations, feasibility studies, business plans, detailed design and engineering, community engagements, environmental and baseline assessments, partnership developments, facility tours and travel, and consulting costs and wages, construction, all those kind of things. We've been involved in rainbow trout, Arctic char, walleye, saugeye, lake sturgeon, lake whitefish, Pacific white shrimp, barramundi, and tilapia. So some of our aquaculture services that Waubetek's involved in, so assist in identifying new and expanding opportunities, identify new innovations, best practices and approaches, advisory on implementation of early stages of aquaculture business development. We help out with joint venture opportunities and partnerships, just support aquaculture and fisheries support, although the fisheries side falls under somebody else within our organization, flagship projects and business improvement projects as well. We do a lot of workshops as well, definitely more pre-COVID, but just as an example, between 2017 and 19, we participated or hosted in 15 full workshops throughout Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. And through that same time, we also did 18 mini or half-day workshops in communities or other locations. So definitely an area that's important. A lot of people don't know about aquaculture, and I know I'm not even scratching the surface today, and I apologize for that, but it starts with understanding and trying to figure out if it can be a fit for you, for a community, and identifying goals and objectives, and we go from there. But the key, a lot of inland communities aren't even aware of aquaculture, and that it is an option to consider on many different levels. So the main focus is designed to allow the aquaculture development officer, so myself, to be a resource, asset, and ally who can provide support for most aquaculture related activities at any stage. So I essentially become part of the team should you want me to be, and I sit with you, and my main focus is to ensure the best interests of the community is acknowledged and ensure that all projects are feasible and sustainable. I'm free, which is pretty cool too, free to communities, individuals, and the groups that I serve. All right, wow, I did it. So here's my contact details, email and phone number, and yeah, I'm pretty approachable. And if you have any questions or anything, I would love the opportunity to spend a little bit more time with you guys navigating through this this topic. And thank you for being given the opportunity to speak to you today. Hope you enjoyed it, and sorry if it was a little rushy.
Oh, Nicholas, that was awesome. So I have a big
Wow.
smile across my face because I have nephews who have just started this little business, and that this sounds like kind of what they're tapping into. So you just gave an auntie a little bit of better understanding about what aquaculture is and what my nephews are up to. So thank you so much.
Right
there
on.
were some comments. Oh, okay. There were some comments in the chat box wondering about Nova Scotia. Do you know of any organization such as yours that provides any support? And same with British Columbia. Do they have? So they're both talking about the NICVI.
Right. So really good question. And, you know, given more time, I definitely would have included that. So there is, I see it just came in, there is the NICVI program. So that's our sister program. So we're NICVI in the middle. NICVI is on the coast, which is the Atlantic. It starts with the Atlantic and then the same. And then on the BC side, it's PICVI. So the Pacific Integrated Commercial Fisheries Initiative. And two great organizations that conduct very similar work that we do. Those two organizations, unlike us who just focus on aquaculture, they do aquaculture and fisheries within their programs. So yeah, Fernando out on the BC side, he's awesome. He actually used to work on the East Coast, and then he moved out to BC. And David Sims and his team are really good to work with as well. And their program was established. They've been in play a lot longer than we have. Central kind of got the love a little bit late after the two coasts did. So they're a little bit more, I guess, established. We're more on the front end kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you. There was another question. Does anyone have any questions as I look in? I'm going back to look at what Cree had to ask about Saskatchewan, but does anyone have any questions? You can unmute yourself if you're comfortable that way. All right, but we'll come back. I'll ask one more time, but this is Cree's question. If a community in Saskatchewan obtained a grant from an AFI for their aquaculture project, could they also utilize NICVI?
Yep. Love playing with people. So yeah, not a problem, not a deterrent.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Any other questions out there before we move along with the rest of our day? I think it was a very thorough, you covered a lot of ground today, Nicholas. So thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. I hope the snow stops stops for you guys. I actually saw this this news from the Toronto, and this young boy, he didn't go to school yesterday, but he spent his day kind of shoveling, and he's like, I'm exhausted, stop snowing already. But so I hope snow stops for you. But then again, Mother Earth knows what Mother Earth needs. So thanks so much for being here. I believe this PowerPoint will be sent to us, and then we send it to you who participated. I think that's how it goes. So if you have any questions, Nicholas's contact information is in there. So feel free to reach out. That's what this is all about, making those connections, asking those questions, and networking. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you are well, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Do something good for your soul. Do something good for the land. Take care, everybody. Peace.
Thank you very much.